We tend to think that music comes from an absolute factor, a word that describes infinity or divinity with infallible symbols of space and time, just as music is the measure of sound inside of space and time. Numbers can tell us things without words. Because we know that numbers rule the universe, here is where our understanding of just how important music is, using numbers that go into the absolute and dividing the spectrum of sound into pitch and energy. For example, let us examine the 12th dimension of a sphere when we apply the chromatic scale of 12 tones to it. What we get, firstly, are two numbers that equate to the third dimension from 12, which is 1 and 2. But here is where the formula for music becomes absolute, when 12 opens the way to a musical sphere, and the way we form musical instruments around the sphere finds its point of origin within it because it was taken out of it, like the chromatic scale in numbers that fit within it to create the music of the instruments. But what if there was a difference in the way a sphere was divided that changed the way music was formed within this absolute geometry? In other words, to change the way music is understood and heard. This is exactly what happens when musical inventions alter this dimension that equates to the type of instruments we play and how they sound. The universal factor has always been 12, but it is the way we break up the sphere that gives us the type of instruments we play. These divisions are where alternate musical formations take place, and we are constantly doing this in the absolute with the chromatic scale. The flag system is actually a reconfiguration of the chromatic scale formed within a sphere of different dimensions. This still pertains to 12, but the division of the sphere makes larger separations, which in turn produce larger areas of music to play within. It is only when we compare the ingredients of the other formations to the flag system that we get the answer of just what we have altered and why. For example, using the 8-note octave numerical symbol, we can divide the sphere by this number and get the figure 1.5. 8 has been taken out of the sphere by 1.5 times. Now let's do the same with the symbolic system of the flags, which equal 5 in number. When we divide 5 into 12, we get 2.4. But now let's compare the divisions by subtracting the lesser from the greater. When we do this, the result becomes 0.9. That is 2.4 flags minus 1.5 octaves. This means we have altered the division of the 12-tone sphere from 8 octaves to 5 flags. Let's look at it another way. From the guitar's point of origin, we know that one hand predominantly and historically fingered the fretboard, while one hand plucked or picked the strings. This inhabitation of select difference favored octaves, since only one hand played the area where the 12 tones appeared. But we saw things differently in the piano, because it necessitated the use of locating the sharps for the two hands that were occupying the chromatic structure. The sharps altered the division of the chromatic scale over the octaves, just like it does in the flag system of the fretboard. The reason the piano did this originally was to increase the musical area for both hands to play, with reference to the absolute. Now suppose we take away the sharps from the piano and just use the keys without any other value. Well, it is with a bit of conjecture that we could, in fact, play the piano without the lifted sharps in the 5th number of the laws of the universe. But we know from experience that we are able to perceive the musical structure of the two-handed instrument much better if we include this altered musical dimension. And that is exactly why the fretboard of the expansion principle works as well, which is in the same way the piano guides the hands into areas that would be in fact alternatively hidden to us without it. To be even more clear, let's change the 0.9 into a percentage. When we do this, the percent increase in the musical esoteric region equates to 60% more after the flag system than it was before we included it with the octaves. This is the same figure for the piano, and this is why the piano has the sharps added to its formula. Let's go even further into the symbols of the flags. Now that we know there are 5, and that 5 is the number of expansion, there are 3 names for all 5, and they refer to their shapes, and so named to guide us in where we locate scales with reference to both hands, that enable us to compare the location of both hands as they move about the board. As I said prior, the symbols are formed from the tuning of the strings, and if we alter their tuning, the shapes also change. And if we lower the pitch of all the strings using the same tuning, the symbols will shift either up or down. One thing is for certain, they depend on the tuning, which is very unlike octaves that remain the same regardless of any changes, because they are locked in place by the 12-tone structure of the chromatic scale. The first flag is the bar flag. This symbol seems to be the beginning, but is actually not. Then there is the balance flag. This symbol derives its name by doing just what its name implies. It balances the hands. Then there are 2 opposite symbols that are termed the polar flags. Here is where the mystery of the sphere finds its center. It lies between the 2 polar flags, just as the Earth has 2 poles, both negative and positive. In between the polar flags is where the system repeats and fans out. Finally, the last flag is termed a balance flag because it flows in the same direction as the other. Think of it this way. If we were to collect all the sharps of the strings and separate them into isolate markings, it could be like an atomic structure without the formation of molecules. The flags are a result of the sharps when they become a system like musical chemistry. Just like anything else, over time the mind of the artist acclimates and refers to the new distances created by their association. And yet there is still even more to explain when they are put into practice. At a mere glance, the hands move into positions reaching for greater distances of what would naturally be invisible scales that lie within the larger divisions of the new art, creating a new medium of expression and a distinctive change in the way the holographic fretboard is perceived, in the science called the expansion principle.